Hey, this is Courtney Barnett, and this is the LSQ podcast.
Welcome, Courtney Barnett, to the LSQ podcast. So great to hear your voice.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
I am curious where you are right now, for starters, because I know you were, like so many people, kind of stuck in one place for a while.
Yeah, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and I've been here for the last year and a half, pretty much, just quietly.
So just solidly, you haven't gotten out at all.
No. Oh, actually, I went just maybe 1 month ago. I went to New Zealand, and I did this solo tour in New Zealand, and it was so beautiful. It was the first shows I'd played in a year and a half, and so it was a real scene change, and just kind of getting back in the swing of things. But it was really special shows.
Yeah, how did it feel like? Yeah, tell me more about what that was like. I mean, how did it feel? Did it feel different at all, or were there sort of things you were aware of that reminded you of early days playing shows?
I think just like probably a whole new level of kind of gratitude on top of what was already there, but just being able to travel and be in a room with other people. I mean, that was new for me, and yeah, it was just so special doing those shows, connecting with the audiences, and I got to play a bunch of my new songs, which always feels terrifying but special.
Speaking of the new songs, obviously they were written during this time when there wasn't really any going anywhere. And it's interesting, Ray Street, so the song that was the first tune shared, describes kind of looking out the window and observing what's happening out there. I'm curious when you first started to kind of have observation of other people feel like a source of inspiration to you as an artist.
I mean, that's a good question. I've never really thought about that. I've never really considered it. I guess I had this other flat in Hobart. I used to live in Tasmania in my kind of late teens, early 20s. And I had this flat that was above a bar, like a bar strip club. And it had this balcony, and I could watch over the street there as well. It was just really, I used to smoke then, and I just sit out on the balcony and watch the kind of world go by. And I mean, maybe that sounds a bit strange, but it's also just, I don't know, you just kind of see the world going past and everyone doing their normal, boring, everyday things. And
oh yeah, I love it. I live on a highly trafficked street in Brooklyn, and I'll sit by my window to smoke my doob or whatever, and I'm like, I am that lady, I mean, I'm not on street level or anything, with the classic lady who leans out the window and just checks stuff out. I'm up enough, but it's good because then I can see stuff that I can see people who don't know they're being seen. They're like on a stressful breakup phone call, and I'm just like a few stories up at smoking out the window, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah. It's just fascinating, like, yeah, the things that you observe in those small moments, I think. And when people are kind of, they look down the street and it's empty, and they just kind of, assume that they're kind of alone or whatever. And it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting. I always find it fascinating seeing how people act and interact. And
yeah, and obviously that question has the, my inference that is kind of a source of inspiration for you, just from what I hear in your lyrics, But yeah, I mean, where do you think your original kind of source of writing inspiration came from? What do you remember about the earliest things that made you want to create?
Earliest was probably, maybe a bit more kind of poetry. It was all a bit more like focused on my kind of thoughts and my feelings, and it was a little bit because I feel like I started writing songs when I was quite young.
Like
so it
how
was
young?
kind of, well, maybe like 12-ish. I mean, I started playing guitar when I was 10, and then I don't even know what those early inspirations were. Just kind of, it was kind of like diary keeping, and maybe learning, doing creative writing at school and learning about poetry at school, and having an assignment to go home and write a poem for class. And so that, I mean, they maybe make sense as the kind of earliest.
But did it feel spicy to you right away, as like where you're like, oh, this is an interesting feeling?
Yeah. I was pretty obsessed, I think, with it. I was very curious, and I wanted to kind of understand what this thing was more. And I think I still have that same curiosity, and I'm always wanting to kind of learn more and experience more and understand more. It's kind of like I feel like writing or songwriting or anything like that it's a constant kind of lesson, a constant journey, which makes it exciting.
Were there any particular poets at that point, before you kind of started to connect it with playing guitar and writing songs, that you felt, I don't know, that you gravitated toward, or felt like, oh, okay, that might be the way I could do it? Because I feel like poetry seems so unapproachable to, like, what they teach you, or at least when I was coming up, like, what they teach you at age 10, 11, 12 about poetry or something in school is so unapproachable and like stuffy or whatever, that it would be hard to feel like, oh, I could write poetry in modern society.
Totally. Oh yeah, it was like, I mean, I remember kind of doing Shakespeare at some point in high school, and a lot of it went over my head, and I couldn't kind of compute a lot of it, but I still found it some level of interesting. But yeah, I think that I hear what you're saying. I think for me, I couldn't grasp a lot of it. Maybe that's why sometimes I was a bit more interested in the kind of simplicity of when someone could say something really simply, but with so much kind of depth and meaning behind it. That probably really stood out to me, because I could probably understand it better, and I could connect with it on that emotional level.
Would you write poems at that point, or did you pretty quickly kind of get into playing guitar and kind of putting it into songwriting form?
No, I wrote lots of poems and lots of kind of short stories. Yeah, I really was obsessed with just writing everything and anything.
Wow. Do you think that, like, if would we recognize sort of your voice in it from people who've heard your music?
I don't know. That's a great question. I would imagine. I think I've gone back, to my parents' house at some point and look and flipped through old books and stuff. And yeah, I think it's probably quite, whatever the word is, trying to like copy someone else without realizing it at the time.
I mean, I just feel like all stuff like that, it's like, for an outsider, it's like, yeah, it was trying to copy this, but there's also this seed of the other thing that's like that's like in there already, probably, that's just like, where it's just like, oh yeah, but that's the seed of you that makes your thing special and unique, hard to see it yourself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of analyze them.
Yeah, bring some of them out, But when it came to picking up the guitar and starting to write songs, who were the artists kind of you thought, okay, this is, if I were to be this person, it would maybe be in this vein?
Pretty much, I mean, I listened to what my brother listened to, and this was that was before we had a CD player, so we had a cassette player with like mixtapes that our neighbor would make us. And so my kind of access to music was pretty minimal. And I just was in love with Jimi Hendrix and Nirvana. And that was kind of my, they were the two things that we would listen to the most.
Yeah, I mean, the Hendrix obviously is intimidating as a guitarist, right? From the shred standpoint of where you're like, well, I guess that's my common thread. I'm like, poetry is too hard. Guitar is too hard. This is why I ask the questions.
Yeah, I mean, well, to this day, I've never learned. I can hardly play any Hendrix, but I don't know. I think there was a lot of poetry in his lyrics that I was quite kind of drawn towards. Like, it's very kind of floaty, kind of magical feeling, sounding. Because I remember when we got our first family computer, and like with dial-up internet, and when I kind of learnt, yeah, and learnt about the whatever the first search engine was back then, I forget, and I would like look up lyrics. I would just spend all my time looking up guitar chords and lyrics and just kind of like trawling through them. And it's kind of like that. I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't trying to emulate or learn from it. I was just obsessed with it. So I was just like consuming it.
Yeah.
Just like hoarding all these things. Maybe it was some sort of like subconscious way of soaking it into your own kind of creative body or something. But I don't know what I was just obsessed. So I would just pour through these pages of lyrics.
And when it comes to Nirvana, I mean, did you have MTV at that point, or were you sort of seeing all of the? Because I guess that does sort of overlap, right? This early era of playing guitar, that is peak MTV grunge Nirvana moment, isn't it?
Yeah. So that I would have been 10, 87, 97 ish.
Yeah.
I mean, late 90s. Yeah. We didn't have MTV, but we had in Australia. There's a TV show every Saturday morning called Rage, which is like music video clips, which I assume is kind of like MTV. Is that what that is? Like music video clips back to back?
Yeah.
Kind of thing?
Well, no, you wish, MTV viewers. I mean, that's what it was, sort of. And I guess back then it kind of was reliably, at least sort of in the morning when you were getting ready to go to school, and after you came home, you could see a bunch of videos before it got into like other weird original programming. But
right. Oh, every day.
Oh yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah, every day, all the time, constant. Which I guess, I guess you were younger then as well. Late 90s is like Kurt had already died, and we're starting to get into the kind of weird permutations of commercial grunge and that kind of shit. So it got sketchy for a minute. But then
definitely in the early 2000s, I definitely there was definitely lots of questionable CDs on my CD rack. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, when did songwriting, instead of sort of learning, absorbing and learning, and when did kind of, really trying to write a song and have your own, voice as an artist begin to be a thing?
I feel like I, worked at it through my kind of teens, and I definitely stayed obsessed, but I think I was more interested then in, I just wanted to form a band with kids at school. And I just, the idea of just that kind of communal musical interaction. But it was just, I don't know, I kind of like had a few little and I was just kind of always the guitarist trying to get people to, like, I was always trying to find a singer and trying to find a band, but no one else seemed as obsessed as me, maybe. So I joined like the school, the jazz band, and I played in like all the musicals, like the orchestra for the musicals and that kind of stuff. And it was probably more then. I was always writing and kind of writing songs in my room, but it wasn't, I was very shy. I never sung in front of anyone until I was like maybe, I don't know, I remember the first song that I sung on a stage, like standing up, playing guitar with a band behind me, was Learn to Fly by the Foo Fighters. Maybe I was 16, 15 or 16. So that was like a pivotal moment where
where was that?
That was in Sydney. I grew up in Sydney, and then my parents moved us to Tassie around that age, like 15, 16. Now I kind of forget. And for some reason, like once I got to Hobart and I was really angry about having to move schools and blah, blah, blah. But then I think I was nervous to make new friends and just for a new environment and all that stuff. And maybe some like weird, extreme, proactive thing kicked in. And that's when I kind of decided, like I wanted to do this thing that I was always too shy to do. It was almost like the opposite reaction of how I was feeling or something. But anyway, I went back to Sydney to my old school, and there was like this concert thing. And so I did it there. And then, so maybe that was like a little bit of a moment because I hadn't sung in front of anyone, and that was kind of exciting. And then I think when I left school, I went to university, and I was doing art, like kind of photography and drawing, like fine arts at university. And that's when when I was supposed to be doing my kind of art assignments, is when I really started focusing on songwriting. It's like the best kind of distraction. So yeah, so that was, I guess, 18.
I love though that you decide, you like had the comeback story. You're like, I left town, but I'm gonna come back for one night only, just to play Foos at this shitty place, and then I'm out again.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean, you were nervous about it, but did it feel good? Did it light something in you?
It's funny, like my concept of time is so warped, and that just feels like another lifetime. And I only actually thought about that exact thing just like last week. I'd almost forgotten about it, and then I remembered last week. But I mean, it must have sparked something, because from then, like, that's what I wanted to kind of. I mean, I always just wanted to make music, but that was probably, I think it's like that thing of, proving to yourself that you can do something, or kind of jumping outside of that comfort zone a little bit. That was definitely what I did. Yeah.
And so how did that kind of develop as you got older and started playing music out in the world a bit more? How did it evolve into finding the direction that you found with your catalog?
I think when I, around that 18, 19, 20-year-old time, when I was really focusing on writing, and I was kind of learning how to record myself at home, and then I started doing like open mic kind of gigs, and yeah, performing my songs. I just kind of play solo wherever, like on any stage that would have me. And I just kept doing that, I guess.
Right, but I mean, you played with bands for a little while, and I'm guessing it sounded, quite different from your songs on your own. Like, was there kind of a progression in your, like, yeah, what you were going for as far as what you wanted to present musically or lyrically, as you in the years leading up to when we started hearing the songs you were releasing?
Yeah, I think I guess I was kind of always doing that solo thing, and then I would join other bands on and off throughout that time. And I mean, again, I guess it's just that kind of lifelong kind of lesson of every band I would join, I would learn something new, and I'd learn something new about music and how to play guitar and how to interact with people and just that human kind of psychology, just kind of a constant state of learning. And I guess that all funnels back in a way into what I do, like how I write my songs. And my songs, I guess, are kind of observational of myself and the world around me. So everything like funnels into it.
Yeah, and I mean, do you feel like there was a point where you realized that you wanted to kind of just be out there on, just to be you? Obviously, when you play the very loud rock shows that you play with your band, who are these ongoing musicians in some cases that play with you, it's not like you're like, I'm Jewel or whatever, and here's the rest of the slobs. But it is, it's your voice. It's very personal. It's you. And for someone who is starting off from being more introverted about being out there on your own in front of an audience, like, was there a moment in playing shows when you feel like you crossed over to the other side of being like, no, this is what it's going to be. It's me playing my songs at the end of the day.
I think a lot of that just ended up being time. Like there came a point where I was doing so much more touring of my own stuff that that was one of the main kind of reasons I stopped playing with other people, because I love it. It's such a different experience, and especially like having the kind of comparison of having my own kind of solo stuff and having a band like my band that I play with. It's a big contrast to being the guitar player in someone else's band. It's a really, like, I really love, because you're kind of service to them. Like, you're there to lift their songs, to the best of your ability, and do anything you can to kind of support whoever's song it is or whoever's band it is or whatever it is. And that's like, it's a really, like, I really enjoy that experience.
Would you say there were periods of kind of exploring music and finding new artists that were either new to you or whatever that you were obsessed with, post this early Hendrix Nirvana phase? What were some of the artists or labels or whatever that you became obsessed with and that you feel like had an impact on the music you were writing?
Yeah, probably so many little phases throughout my life. Maybe, I remember going to, when I first moved out of home, kind of, in that 18, 19 age, when I was at university and going to art school and just kind of, socializing with other people outside my kind of school life and family life. And, when you discover a new world, I guess, my favorite kind of way of discovering music is through friends or through, people whose taste you really admire. And I remember there was a period where someone must have shown me like the Breeders and Patti Smith, but I just, even like throughout my kind of 20s, just discovering like Nina Simone, Neil Young, I'd never listened to growing up, and then kind of had this moment in my early 20s like, wow, this is great. Who's this guy? This is amazing.
He's a wonderful Canadian.
And I just love, like, I love to get excited about music. And I think there used to be a part of me that was like, for some reason, like, it's embarrassing to admit that you had never heard of this person or this thing or this band. And I just think it's special. Like, it's exciting to be constantly learning and consuming new things. And when they do like really excite you or inspire you, then like that's a really amazing thing.
Yeah, and I always feel like there's plenty of time. Ideally, there's plenty of time to hear something, to get exposed to something that you've haven't yet, and it's nice to save stuff too. I have certain things where I Like, I still haven't seen every episode of Arrested Development because, this way there's still some new ones to see, There's still some Bob Dylan albums I've never listened to because he's got plenty, and some of them are supposedly a little rough anyway, but I'll have a first time with some of those one day.
Yeah, I did a lot of that last year in my very quiet solitude of COVID year. Just kind of went into the back catalogue of artists that I love, of albums I'd never listened to. Actually, last year was a big kind of musical discovery year for me, probably because I had that time and that space to kind of explore.
What'd you get
things.
into?
I mean, a lot of kind of Arthur Russell and Brian Eno, and then kind of I love to get obsessed with someone and then kind of explore their whole inspirational history, or what inspired them, or what motivated them.
In terms of your lyric writing, like how has your approach to it evolved since you started, or do you have any kind of specific practice for lyric writing?
I think I go through phases of process and practice. There was a period a couple of years, maybe 2019, where when I was home and I was getting up every day and drinking coffee and sitting at a typewriter and just kind of seeing what happened. And I've definitely tried to kind of be regimented with times, but I don't know, a lot of the time I feel like I kind of float around different processes, and nothing works and nothing doesn't work, and I think that's a good way to be. I think it's dangerous if you're like, I can only write at my desk with my pen, and
Right.
nothing else, it's dangerous to kind of, I don't know, like hide yourself in that restrained kind of environment
Right.
that you can't kind of break out of.
But you are generally keeping notes and jotting things down kind of all the time, and making yourself do that so that the faucet doesn't stop.
Yeah, I think, and for me, I think that's the best way. Like, some days I spend hours writing, and then I might go for weeks with nothing, but I constantly, have a kind of a catalog or an archive of ideas. And I think for me, a lot of the time, like, it's not like I'll go back and find something from 6 months ago or a year ago that at the time I thought was okay, but I wrote it down anyway. And then you see it, a period of time later, and it just hits you in a different way. And it's, maybe it makes more sense, or maybe it has developed this whole level of meaning. And and the other thing, I try to write down dreams a lot, whenever, like, no matter how kind of mundane or irrelevant they seem. I find dreams to be really interesting. I try to just write down everything.
Do you find that words are suggestive of melodies? Or are they kind of separate processes? Because a lot of artists, they have the old McCartney ham and eggs kind of thing of, it's sort of this simultaneous process of like words and melody kind of emerging, and maybe they've got some words they've written down over time that they like, that they can kind of fit to it. But I find like that's pretty often a process people describe. It sounds like your process often involves that there's this pile of lyric or just phrases, ideas, poetry, if you will, like, and then there's how do they make sweet love with the melodies?
That's the mystery of it. I do not know the answer. It's just, it's a lot of kind of blind dates, I guess. It's like blind dates, sitting down with the lyric book and sitting down with a guitar and trying to kind of piece things together. Or sometimes I just sit down on the couch and I'm watching TV and a whole idea will come to me in one, like the guitar and the lyrics. And it's, I I never know what's going to happen. That kind of keeps it really exciting. Sometimes very frustrating, when I feel like I don't know the answer, and I feel like I'll never be able to write another song again. When I'm like when you're in that moment of like nothing's working, and then a week later, it just accidentally write a song that I love. So I never know what's going to happen.
You're like, thank God I watched that episode of Scrubs or whatever.
There's inspiration in everything. I think that's the lesson. That's the most important lesson I've ever learned. You can't just like sit down at a desk and bang your head against the wall for 6 hours and assume some grand idea will come. Because the greatest ideas do come when you're like, getting a blood test at the local medical center, and you're sitting in the waiting room reading a magazine or something. That's when the best ideas come.
That's when you whip out your typewriter and you just get a clacking. So the notes, there must be a robust section, list of notes in the phone, despite your best efforts to type it out. I'm imagining that there's some heavy notes in there.
Yeah, I got bundles of notes everywhere. They're definitely in the phone, definitely in the cupboard, in books and just bits of paper. Yeah, and then I try my best to organize everything, but it always just ends up being a bit of an organized mess, which is okay. Because sometimes I think, you might lose an idea for a reason, or, like misplace. Maybe a song gets like pushed to the back of the cupboard and then you find it years later and it makes, like I said before, like it just makes more sense for some reason.
So when you going into making this album, obviously you were at the mercy of circumstances, as we all were, stuck in one place and not knowing how this next album would enter the world, and what the landscape for that would be. Do you think that influenced what you ended up writing about?
Yeah, I think without a doubt. Environment and surroundings and circumstance, I think, is always going to affect me in some way, even, no matter how hard you try. I didn't want to write like a COVID specific album, but there's always going to be bits that seep in. Because it's the time in the world that I was living in, it's the news that I was consuming, the conversations I was having with friends. So I think, I think that my kind of circumstances always kind of soak into the songs I'm writing.
To the extent that you can kind of impose from outside what you want the next group of songs to be, because as you say, sometimes they come, sometimes they don't come. But yeah, did you, once it was clear you were beginning to make an album, and I know you were working with Stella on some of this stuff as well, but did you have any concrete ideas of things you wanted to try or ways you wanted it to be, a stretch for you?
I always want to push myself somehow, again, with that kind of constant learning experience and just trying to step outside the comfort zone a little bit and trying different things, trying different kind of processes and methods. But I didn't have too much of an idea. No, it wasn't too concrete, and a lot of it was kind of, again, the circumstance. Like I was writing I was alone for so much of it, and so I did a lot of kind of home recording and demoing of these songs, which I don't always do. Normally I work on songs and then a week before I go in the studio I show the band and we kind of put it together. But back to my kind of early 20s, late teens way of kind of demoing and recording ideas. So maybe, the songs kind of grew in a bit of a different way. And then working with Stella was so great because we kind of got to swap, I guess, just swapping kind of musical, like her musical knowledge is so rich and so broad. And so I kind of consumed a lot of that I think that kind of filtered into the way I was thinking about the new songs. So it was, yeah. It was
I mean, and you can tell there's a different approach to rhythm, which makes sense on the songs that are more like rhythmically driven, which makes sense, considering she's just such a rhythm king.
Yeah.
And it must have been just sweet to have a collaborator and friend around, because she was there in Australia the entire time as well, right? In Melbourne.
Yeah, exactly. Because she grew up in Sydney also, and so was kind of back home.
I know we have claimed her here in the US.
Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of, because we worked together years ago on the Kurt album, and then since then one day I knew I wanted to work with her again, and then we were in LA, we were in touch kind of at the start of 2020 or late 2019, and we did this one, I did this charity show, and I got her to play in the band, and then it was kind, the fact that we both were back in Australia, and kind of, I was trying to think of who I wanted to make my album with in this strange world where I couldn't really see anyone, and it was hard to kind of, Melbourne was kind of in lockdown and we couldn't go to studios, and I didn't quite know what I was doing, and I was chatting with her and kind of asking her advice and getting a list of engineers she liked and producers she liked, and then I kind of, over a few weeks of talking to her, I realized that I actually just wanted to work with her. It was this very slow realization.
Thank you so much for connecting with me to do this. Really appreciate it, Courtney.
Oh, no worries. It was so nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Courtney Barnett's fantastic new album, Things Take Time, is out now, and she's going to be on tour around the world extensively in the coming months. And thank you so much for listening to episode 69 of the LSQ podcast. We're also now at the end of this season 4, and I'm excited for the stuff that's lining up for next year, including the legendary Steven Van Zandt. I recorded an interview with him just the other day that I'll share eventually. You can reach me in all of the places at JennyLSQ, and I'll talk to you next time.